Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This is the second video in our series on updating my garage storage. This week we're going to be making a drawer for my thicknesser planer storage unit. Roll the intro. So the first stage was to get some accurate measurements. Luckily, because these are all pre-built units, they were all pretty straightforward. It was 40 mil across and 78 mil long. So I wanted to get accurate measurements, and then I moved on to selecting wood from the what seems like never-ending wood pile of the salvaged kitchen unit. Now, originally I hadn't planned on making two drawers, but as you'll see at the end of the video when we review the catastrophe that is the drawer, I pretty soon changed my mind. But in a minute I will do a little bit of talking to camera and I'll sort of make it sound like I'm doing two, but actually I dropped the idea. I'm really grateful to have this wood. Some of it's going to be burnt because it's only really good for the fire, but there are lots of really nice pieces, some of which are in really good condition, which I'll be able to use over and over again. So I've just found this piece, which I think is the end of a unit. On the front, I know it's rough, it's got some screw hole here, screw holes there where they've come out, but it has got an edge already in it, and I only need 40 centimetres. That's the width of the drawers from side to side. So I've just measured, and within this gap, there is a little dent there, but within this gap, I've easily got the 40 centimetres, so that potentially could be at least one of the drawer fronts. I'm only going to put two drawers in, I think. I'm going to have one smaller one and one larger one, one deeper one. So I think that'll be the front of the deeper drawer, so I can get that on the table saw and take it out. But so far, so good. So I've got the drawer of the front on one. I've also found these two pieces as well. So this piece will be the base of one of the drawers. As you can see, it will go in there, and I've got enough here for the side of one of the drawers. It doesn't matter about the holes, you won't see it because obviously it will be inside the unit, so I'm not too worried about how that looks, but I've got enough here for the size of the unit, and I've got a couple more of these units that are the same width that are spaced out around the garage. So I think I've at least got the sides of the top drawer, obviously not the front and the back, and I've got the front of the deeper drawer. So far so good. I'll keep looking for some other pieces of wood. So I had to tidy up a couple of pieces of the wood. This is the wood I was going to use for the sides. The only thing about these units is obviously they've only got grooves in three sides, and some of the units like this one doesn't have any grooves in it at all. This is just literally four pieces of wood all screwed together, and the board that was inside, which I thought was in a groove, wasn't. It was literally just screwed on the inside. So that made salvaging some of the wood a little bit more difficult than other bits, but it did give me some really nice sides and some wood that I can use for the front. The next stage was to cut all the wood, and as you can see here, I set up a little sort of station, really is the best way to do it, for the plunge saw. And this actually worked really well. The only problem is, as it sort of got towards the end a bit, in the middle there, you can see where the two strips join, it's sort of bowed. But one of the things that I've done recently, which will be a future video on the Garage Workshop, is I've bought a really long track. I spent quite a lot of time researching getting a longer track for my track saw. I got the original site from Lidl that you can buy extended track saws on, and I bought a really long one, and I was going to do a video on how to cut it down, and then lo and behold, Peter Mallard, I don't know if you've seen his video, has done exactly the video that I was going to do by some bizarre twist of fate. So anyway, once I'd cut all the wood to size, it was just a case of dry fixing and offering the box together. I used those Aldi clamps, which I've referred to a few times in videos. just to hold the pieces together. They're fantastic, these clamps. They've had a lot of clamps Audi lately, but these ones haven't returned, which is a bit of a shame. And the first time they do, I'll certainly be getting some more. So I got the box all connected, and I was really pleased to see that the groove, the inbuilt groove that I was going to use for the sort of bottom of the drawer, was perfectly in line. I mean, of course it should be. They're all manufactured units. They should be exactly correct, but it's always quite nice when you're sort of cutting them around and Frankensteining them yourself that they actually do line up. So no wood glue on this one. I literally just drilled pilot holes, countersunk the screws, and I just screwed it in to keep it nice and sturdy, and it was really sturdy, and also significantly heavier. I don't know why I thought it wasn't going to be, but it was a lot heavier than normal. So all the screws that I'm using, I should point out, are the screws that I used when I disassembled the cabinets, as you just saw me do a minute ago. So this is a real recycler's project. Basically everything is exactly as it should be, and it's completely recycled. So got 3 sides of the box done, and now it was time to measure for the inlay of the drawer, which you can see me doing here. I had a piece that was exactly, pretty much exactly the right width. It only needed a little bit of trimming. I didn't want to use the table saw because I've got this little station set up with my plunge saw. I thought it was worth just keeping that. One thing I did use is, this is a cheap Parkside. It's like a set of 3, almost like T-squares, I suppose. And this one actually isn't very good. I thought they were pretty good, but I did some testing off camera, which you can't see, and put it against my framing square, and it's actually quite out. So I'm going to do a little bit of research and invest in them. I normally speak very highly of Parkside tools, but this is one of those episodes where I'm not very good, cheap quality, that guide. But my Parkside plunger, on the other hand, love it. After we managed to put all that bit together, this is where I made the first mistake. And every time I've done a drawer unit like this, I've done quite a few of these now when I made my mitre station, etc., I have always made the same mistake. I just will never learn. And I don't understand why. I think it's because I just sort of did this in a hurry on autopilot and didn't think about it. But of course I cut it, and as you can see, it's sitting just proud there. And I'm thinking, what's gone wrong? And of course, I always cut these so they stick proud, sit proud, and I should of course cut them under so they're below the level. Luckily, I worked it out pretty quickly, got it back on the plunge saw, and it was perfect. It did need a little bit of fettling, and partly this is because at the bottom it went into the groove, but it wasn't 100%, and I wanted to get this right, so I just put it back in, cut a tiny little bit off, as you can see with the plunge saw there, just leveled it up a bit, and it went in perfectly, and as you can see, all fits together nicely. So back went on the clamps, and exactly the same process as you've just seen for the bottom half of the drawer. I just put the drills in, drill bit in, screwed them in. I went for 3 fixings on each side just because I know this potentially is going to have a bit of weight, and it's already quite weighty itself. So I wanted to make sure that I got all of the things in the right place and got them as tough and as hard as I could. So this bit is where it became a little bit more complicated, and I think this is partly because I made things much more complicated than they needed to be. So the plan was to offer this up and then clamp it to the side and then measure the gap, which actually I didn't in fact need to clamp it because I was able to get a good measure, and I'd always planned to make non-sliding sliders, if you see what I mean. So I got a piece of MDF and I just cut 3cm strips, just 6 of them. That was exactly the right size piece of wood, by the way. So I got the 3, and then I marked exactly the middle of the drawer, and I sort of spanned the strips across the middle, so they're exactly halfway up. Then I drilled them again, pre-drilled them, countersunk, got some out of my tub of, yes, never-ending tub of screws from the chicken coop, and I drilled them in. Now, I did make one mistake here, which you can't see on camera. One of the screws, obviously I countersunk the drill too deep, because one of the ends of the screws has actually gone through into the inside. So I'll get my little multi-tool out and just take the end of that off. The other thing I had to do, you can see me doing that, I had to cut off the MDF where it had come from, because I wanted it to sit absolutely flush, and they were, the first time I put them on, they were just a little bit leveled up. So when that strip was on, very simple, just putting the strips either side, getting a good measurement so I knew when I put it into the unit how big it had to be. I had this little offcut which was just the right size, too long, but it was just the right depth. So to get the strips in place, I just clamped it up, and then I fixed the first strip to the wall. It was nice and level, fixed that first strip, and then I used one of the spare strips as the sort of middle strip, and I think this is where I went wrong in the first instance. What I should have done is used a strip of wood, a sort of spacer that was slightly bigger than the slide that I had on my drawer, and I didn't. I did one which was exactly the right size. I did leave a couple of mil out, but that wasn't enough. And when I fixed the top one on the right hand side, it also dropped, which I didn't see because it's quite fiddly trying to do this, as you can see. And I hadn't noticed that the top one had dropped. So when I put the drawer in, and you'll see that in a minute, the drawer was far, far, far too tight. It just would not come out. It went in all right, but it wouldn't come out. And off camera, I just sanded down some of the drawer on either side just to get a better fix. And what I really should have done was go back and take out the top drawer, or loosen it, or put it up, which is exactly what I did in the end. So after I'd fixed one strip, I fixed the second strip on the left-hand side to sort of give me a minimum gap. Now, here I still had one of the spare inserts, which was sort of the top. So I was able to space it out quite nicely. When it got to the other side, of course, I didn't have a spare strip because I'd installed 3 of the 4. So when I installed the 4th strip, which you'll see in a second, I just used some offcuts of wood, which were the same width, and I just sort of jacked them up a little bit with a couple of the little shelf holders. You can see me looking for something there. So I just put 2 of those little plastic holders there, and you can see, and it just gave me about a 3 or 4 mil gap, which allowed me to fix the top. So this side was nice and easy because I had that spare strip of wood. It was easier to fix. When it got to fixing the other side, it was a bit more problematic because obviously I didn't have a spare piece. The only piece I had left was the piece that I was fixing to the edge of the cabinet. So as I said, I had to improvise, but with that said, the improvisation actually seemed to work all right. You can just see me there finding a couple of bits of wood I had lying around which were the right width. So after shuffling across the very dirty floor, I now had it fixed, and this is where I went wrong, I think, because the bits of wood I had weren't the whole length. Where I connected the top and I slid them along and connected the bottom, it sort of dropped in between, and that was where I went wrong. But, you know, like all of these things, you learn from mistakes, don't you? And I know that, well, if I ever did this again, the first thing I would do is do the drawer at the same time that I'm making the entire carcass. That would be the first thing. So when it was done, I offered it up. It did fit. This is after I'd done some of the sanding, and you can see it fitted properly. The final stage was to get another piece of wood. I found a side of a door, which was actually in really, really good condition. And this was going to be the face plate, or the drawer front of the unit that I made. So again, I went back to my unit jig. I had noticed that on the last cut, it must have got slightly out of kilter. So you just saw me there adjusting it with the square, but it just got sort of slightly out of level. So when I was putting the line in to do a cut, it wasn't giving me an accurate cut. So I just made an adjustment, put it back in. I really like this setup. I'm definitely going to do that again because it worked really well. Put the dodgy old ruler back on it again. It was just a little bit too long, and I wanted to trim it down. And also, one of the edges wasn't great, if I'm being honest. So I also wanted to take that off. So when it was on, I offered it up and in it went. And as you can see, definitely a bit of a wonky donkey. And even though it works and it does exactly what I set out to do, not 100% happy with it, to be honest. So the drawer unit is finished. To be honest, I'm not very pleased with it. I'd probably struggle to give it a 5 out of 10. I think the drawer itself is okay, the way it was made is okay, and the edging strip is okay, but no matter what I do, it's really stiff to pull out, and as you'd have seen in the video, I sanded quite a lot out, and the sanding has given me another problem. When I put this faceplate on, it was perfectly level and perfectly straight, and now I put it on, wherever I put it, you can see there's a bigger gap there than there is there. And when I put the spirit level on it, it's slightly out, but then if I pull the drawer out and angle it to the side, you can see there's drop in it, and obviously that's where I've had to sand it. And I think what happened was I sanded it and then realised perhaps it wasn't sanding that was the problem, it was the actual rail, and the two wooden rails that I put in at the back, one had slightly dropped and was pinching the wood. So there is a little bit of give in it now, which shouldn't be there, which is what means it doesn't close properly. So it looks a bit untidy. I'm not very happy with that, to be honest. At some point in the future, I might come and redo that. I was originally going to make two drawers, but I actually quite like having that space under there. I've got a shelf which I can put in just there to sort of support. So I'm going to put that shelf in, and I'm going to leave that bottom area for storing things in, like my soldering iron and kit like that. So as you can see, not a fantastic success, but as I said to you in the very first video, if you've seen that, if you haven't, please check them out. The whole point of the garage workshop is not to produce professional quality carpentry or cabinetry. That's not what I do. I have a job, believe it or not, it's not this, and this is something I do for a hobby, and not everything is going to go right. I can live with this drawer because it's going to be rarely seen and it's be in the corner somewhere, and at some point I might change the drawer, redo the slides, but I'm happy with it. It does what I wanted it to do. I've made quite a sturdy drawer which opens and closes. I never set out to make anything that looks beautiful, but I'm a bit disappointed that it's a bit on the wonk. But then again, it's an amateur project, so they can't all go well. Thank you very much for joining me on this week's video. Apologies if you've seen me sweat a bit of the way through. Got a bug at the moment and it's really zapping my energy, so a bit of a shorter video than normal. But next week's video, I'm going to be looking at changing the top of my mobile workstation, because the wood that's on the top of that, although I love it and it's really old, it's about 80 years old, that it's really bowed. In my last two projects, when I've needed a flat surface, I haven't got one, and I have got a piece of wood that's been left over from the salvage of the kitchen units that I've been working on. I've got a piece of worktop that will just about fit, so I'm going to work on there. And then upcoming, I might try and tackle my mitre station, which at the moment isn't as effective as it could be. So if this is your first visit, please go back and look at all my other videos and don't forget to subscribe. If you have been watching regularly, please leave me a comment. Thanks to everyone who's left comments so far. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and give me a like. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll catch you next week on the Garage Workshop.